All right, so the last thing for the presentation concepts for today is the discussion of a few more terminologies: pass, break, and continue. We're going to look at these keywords in the code, but right now it's just we want to talk about what they do. So the pass statement is just a placeholder for future code. A lot of times when you're coding, you might know, like, I know I need a loop here, but I don't know what it needs to do. So you can't just leave it blank. The same thing with any function, the same thing with any if statement. You can't just leave it blank. Even if you know that you need it there, the code needs to know that it's going to do something. Putting the pass statement in lets the code know, lets the compiler know that it's not doing anything, but that it is supposed to be there. Otherwise, it's going to give you an error. So the pass statement just allows you to put in some placeholders. I do this a lot with functions. If I know I need a function, but I don't necessarily want to write it, or I don't know exactly how I'm going to write it, then I'll just put a pass in there. There's other ways to manage that. In other languages like C++, I might just return 0. It doesn't do anything, but it doesn't error. It lets the code compile. But a pass, all it does is it lets the code compile, even though some parts of your code might not be complete. The break statement, what it's used for is when you're in a loop. I think I told you the while loop will go on and on and on and on and on and on forever. The break statement will kick you out of the loop. So even if the condition is still true, the break statement kicks you out of the loop anyway. This is really useful because we don't always know, like I said, how many times the while loop is going to run. And sometimes we might have multiple conditions that we want to exit us from the loop. In order to do that, we can use a break statement, and that gets us out of the loop even though the condition is true. So, simple terms, it just exits the loop early. The condition is still true. It should be running the loop, but it kicks out of it because we used a break statement. Now, the continue statement is really cool. It does the same thing as the break, right? Like, it stops the loop right where it is, and it jumps to the end of the loop. But instead of exiting the loop, it starts the loop over from there. So sometimes with a continue, like, you can skip a large portion of the calculations in the loop if you don't need them. But you don't get out of the loop entirely. So this is useful when everything reads from top to bottom, right? So sometimes maybe early on in the loop, something happens and you know you don't need to calculate the rest of the loop. You just hit continue, skips the rest of the loop, but then it starts the loop over again. So those are the three keywords and what they do. We'll look at examples of them in the code here in a minute. But as a summary, all we talked about these different conditions and loops. If, else, and elif, these are standard terms, keywords that Python has access to. If has a very specific structure, if, condition, event. Else has a specific structure, else, event. And elif is just combining those two, else, if, event, condition, event. The while loop looks exactly like an if statement, and the for loop has its own kind of unique structure that we looked at. But the idea of each of these has a unique purpose, not just in Python, in every programming language. But these are the building blocks for what any code that you're ever going to write is going to do. We've talked about variables. We've talked about the arithmetic. We've talked now about loops. Those core components, without knowing the logic, right? Logic is what kind of handles the code, what builds the code. But as far as the syntax goes, 80-90% of anything you would ever write is going to be done with the tools that we've learned so far. So there's a lot more to it than that, but this is the gist of all of the syntax tools that we need. Is kind of wrapped up now. There's other stuff, but 80%, 90% of what you're going to do is using the tools that we've already learned. So that's what I've got. In the next video, we're going to go through and we're actually going to look at writing some of this code, modifying it, printing it, seeing exactly what it does, and talking maybe about some of the questions that might come up on the certification while we're going through it. But that's what I've got for now, and we will see you in the next video.